Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's episode of the BioSlife franchise product training call. My name is Dr. Peter Verdegam. I'm Chief Science Officer at Unicity International. I'm glad you joined me today for this call, and today's topic is going to be a little bit of a technical topic. I've decided to include a call about cholesterol measuring, and that's, of course, very important because BioSlife, as we all know, is the major natural patented alternative to statin medication when it comes to lowering cholesterol values and optimizing cholesterol values, really, when it comes to our lipid situation. But a very important aspect of that, of course, is measuring it. How do we know that our product is successful? And how do we measure it in a correct way? And that's just actually not as easy as it may think. You think, well, I'm going to the lab, they prick my blood, and I see the results. And, of course, that's the way to do it. But there are a lot of pitfalls, really, that can give you the wrong impression of where your cholesterol levels are really going, and sometimes may even give you a false result. And that's just very important to know. BioSlife, of course, is a very unique product in the nutritional supplement field because you can so easily measure the effect. It is so easy to have your blood pricked, to get those numbers and to observe the effect directly that the BioSlife product has in your health, and particularly for your risk for cardiovascular disease, for heart disease, and stroke. So it's very important to know how to do it and what can go wrong if you don't do it right. What are some of the options to measure cholesterol? Well, of course, basically there are two options. One is you can go to a lab. You can get a lab order from a doctor, or you can even go to a lab by your own and have your cholesterol measured over there. That's one option. The second option is do it at home. We have these days the access to what we call handheld devices, which are small devices that you can use yourself in home or anywhere else you want to do it and measure your own cholesterol. Sometimes you have to prick your finger, collect a drop of blood, and send it off to a lab, and you will have your results back home in a couple of days. Or you can actually have the full device in your home, and you can do the measurement yourself so that you have your cholesterol results right there in a couple of minutes. Now, regardless of which method you choose, there are things that you have to be aware of. And let me review those things. What can go wrong? What can go wrong if you measure your cholesterol and if you observe a number that you say, this is not right. This is not what I'm expecting. I have this particular LDL value, bad cholesterol value. I started taking BioSlife, and it's gone up. The next time I'm reading it, I see a higher value. How can that be? Or it's gone down so enormously that you don't trust the results. I mean, these things can happen, and it's very likely has something to do with the way you measure your cholesterol. So what are some of the pitfalls? First of all, we shouldn't measure your cholesterol too fast after starting taking BioSlife. You shouldn't do it every week. That doesn't really make sense. Cholesterol is a parameter in your blood, different kinds, LDL, bad, HDL, the good, total cholesterol. Those are all the different kinds that are measured today, as you know. Also triglycerides is, of course, part of the fat measurement in your blood. These are parameters that change slowly. It took you maybe 10, 20 years to build up a certain LDL level in your blood. So it's not going to change that fast. People that, I know you're enthusiastic, you measured your cholesterol, you decided to start taking BioSlife, and you want to see the results, so next week you do it again. Well, that's really too quick. Your body needs time to adapt to the ingredients in BioSlife, needs time to reestablish a balance in your blood lipid levels so that your body, your body needs time to actually react to those to BioSlife. So you don't want to do it too fast. Another problem with doing it too fast is you have to realize that your LDL levels fluctuate slightly over the day. So if you measure your LDL level right now and you measure it again 2 hours from now, you may have a difference, and that's because there are little fluctuations going on. Now imagine a downward slope of cholesterol over time, but on that downward slope there's a little fluctuation, a little up and down movement. If you would measure your cholesterol too fast, and at one point you're measuring at one of the valleys of that movement, and the next time you measure it at one of the peaks of that slow movement, you actually end up with values that you really cannot compare with each other. You should give it more time. You should measure it over the longer run. So the best frequency of measuring your cholesterol when you take BioSlife is really once every 4 weeks. That is, you have to give it minimum 4 weeks. And it's interesting if you have high cholesterol levels to start with, you start using BioSlife, you want to measure it right before you start, at 4 weeks, at 8 weeks, at 12 weeks maybe, but then you shouldn't continue with that 4-week period. You can, take longer periods in between. Go to once every 8 weeks, once every 3 months. That's a time frequency of your cholesterol measurement. That's just, common sense, really. Another important thing is that you have to realize is that you want to stick with the same methodology every time. It is very bad advice to have your baseline cholesterol measured by the lab around the corner at the hospital, and then your 4-week data by a handheld device, or vice versa, or switch it more frequently over time. Why is that? Well, every methodology, regardless of what you measure, but in this case cholesterol, has its own technological features, and it means that there is what we call a standard error. There is always error associated with measuring something, but this is tied to the specific type of measurement you use. And if you switch from the lab to the handheld device, you're going to introduce a different standard error, and that means you are going to have results which cannot be compared with each other. So that's a very important thing. Once you decide on a way of measuring cholesterol, you have to stick with that way. Otherwise, your comparison of results really doesn't mean anything. That is just important to do. Another thing is fasting. Fasting is very important when you want to measure your cholesterol values correctly. And that has a specific reason that I'll explain to you now. It doesn't really matter if you measure your cholesterol using a handheld or with a lab. You always have to be fasted in order to have an accurate result. Now, let me explain to you why that is. The technology today in the lab is not that advanced yet that it can actually measure all the different fractions of your lipid values. The lipid panel you measure at the lab consists of total cholesterol, which is the sum of all types of cholesterol in your body. It has LDL value, which is the bad cholesterol. It has the HDL value, which is the good cholesterol. And typically it also measures the triglyceride value at the same time. Now let's start with the triglyceride value. The triglyceride value is the parameter of your lipid values which is most sensitive to what you eat. So that means if you have a certain triglyceride level, let's say 100 milligrams per deciliter, and you eat a very fatty meal, like a fatty hamburger, and you measure your triglyceride levels 2 hours after that, you're going to have a value maybe 150. It may change that rapidly because triglycerides are very sensitive to what you eat. So in order to have a similar situation every time you measure triglycerides, you're going to have to be fasted, because fasted means what is your starting value before any food has had an effect on the triglyceride levels. What is the baseline value? And that is, after a 12-hour fast. That's the best thing to do. When you want to have your triglycerides and your lipid values tested, you don't eat anything from, let's say, 8 o'clock the evening before. You can drink stuff. You can drink water. You can drink, diet drinks, or preferably not sugary drinks. You can drink coffee or tea. Alcohol is also not preferred. But you can not for sure eat anything, because that starting from 8 o'clock the previous night. And then you don't eat anything till the morning, then you're 12-hour fasted, and then you have your lipid panel. That's the best thing to do. And then you can compare over time your triglyceride level in a meaningful way. That's for triglycerides. Now let's look at the other parameters. Total cholesterol for total cholesterol measurement, it's not really that important to be fasted, because total cholesterol doesn't react that fast with things that you eat. It's kind of stable. It changes, of course, if you eat, months in a row very fatty food, it's going to increase, but, it does not going to make that difference on a particular day if you've eaten or not. So for total cholesterol, it's not that important. The same thing for HDL. HDL is also not that important. It doesn't change that fast with the type of food you've eaten. And in fact, most people know for LDL it is important, but it is important for a reason that most people don't expect. First of all, your LDL value also doesn't change that quickly when you've eaten very fatty food. So in principle, you do not need to be fasted to measure your LDL level corrected. But actually you do. And not many people understand why that is. And that has to do with the technology that is used today in the lab and also by the handheld device to measure LDL. And when I say measure LDL, I make a mistake because it's actually calculate LDL. There is no good, or there used to be no good way of actually measuring the LDL fraction of the cholesterol. So there was a scientist called Mr. Friedewald, and he was a scientist, and he developed a an equation, a calculation way of calculating the LDL if you know the other parameters. So he knew we could measure triglycerides effectively, total cholesterol effectively, HDL effectively, and now he devised an equation based on those numbers. You could calculate the LDL, and that equation is called the Verdegam equation. And the equation is as follows: the LDL is equal to the total cholesterol minus the HDL value minus 1/5 of the triglyceride value. And there's the key to why you need to be fasted to accurately measure or obtain your LDL value. The triglycerides. The triglycerides are part of the Verdegam equation. And since triglycerides are very influenced by the type of food you eat, your LDL is going to be influenced because the triglycerides are part of that equation. So that means if you have eaten a lot of fat before you take your lipid panel, your triglycerides are going to be artificially high. And that means if you put them in the Verdegam equation, your LDL is going to be artificially low. And that's why fasting is very important when you take your cholesterol measurement. For a lab, but also for a handheld device. So that's also a very important thing to realize. Without fasting, you cannot trust your results. And what sometimes happens if you talk to people about their cholesterol values, at the baseline they were fasted, and the 4-week data they were not fasted, and that already means you can't compare the data because you have to be fasted in all times you do the measurement. Another thing which can go wrong is, also labs at the hospital can make mistakes. So if you are getting results back, let's say you have an HDL to start with of 35, and you take BioSlife for a month, and now your HDL is 80. Well, I wouldn't trust that too much. I mean, BioSlife is good, but that's a really very large increase over 4 weeks of time, and something must have gone wrong in this case. And that can happen. I mean, the lab can, make certain mistakes that people are working there, and where people are working, mistakes are being made. So you have to realize that the results should be in line what you can expect. And a realistic increase in HDL from 35 would be, going to 50 or so. That would be a very good result. But going to 80 in 4 weeks, that's kind of unusual, and that's something I wouldn't really trust. The reverse is also true. If you have, an HDL of 40, and in 4 weeks your HDL is 17, well, then absolutely something is wrong. That cannot be a realistic result, and you have to have your blood values redone to get your accurate results. That's just common sense as well. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the handheld device, because the handheld device is a very popular way of getting your cholesterol numbers measured. And it's also a very effective way in the BioSlife business, because, you can take that handheld device, you can take it anywhere. It's battery operated. You also have other types that need power plugs, but, and you can, confront people that you're trying to get interested in BioSlife immediately with their current cholesterol results. That is just a very powerful way of getting, confronting people with their current health situation and, explaining them why they need BioSlife and how BioSlife is going to influence their cholesterol levels and thereby their risk for cardiovascular disease and stroke. That is just a very powerful way. So a lot of people have purchased a handheld device in order to do just that. We at Unicity actually offer one of those handheld devices to the public through our website, and that device is actually called the CardioCheck PA. The CardioCheck PA is one of the options to measure cholesterol. I personally like the CardioCheck PA because it has a flexible functionality. First of all, it's battery operated. That's just very important because you can take it anywhere. I mean, we know that particularly if you travel internationally, as some of our BioSlife franchise owners do, have an international business, there are different power sources, different plug sizes, and sometimes it's just very convenient if you have your machinery, your handheld device, battery operated. Another advantage of the CardioCheck PA is that the strips that it uses to measure cholesterol do not have to be refrigerated. And that's also a great technological advantage because also when you're traveling again, you have to refrigerate your testing devices. That's, complicates things. So it's great to have that being available at room temperature. We offer it through our website. If you go to the product information section of our website, you can find the CardioCheck PA. I must say we don't actually sell it. It's not a Unicity product, but we just contracted with a company that offers these CardioCheck PA devices, and so we don't sell it. We just redirect you to that site where you can actually buy it. And if you buy a device on that site, you buy a package. You buy the handheld device, you buy a nice bag, and you buy a supply of testing strips. Now, these handheld devices work very easy. What you do is you prick your finger. You just need a little drop of blood from any finger, basically just as a diabetic would measure his glucose values every day. You do the same thing. You prick your finger with a drop of blood. The drop of blood goes into a capillary tube, and you put that into a strip that fits into the handheld device. And then usually 4 minutes, 5 minutes later, you have all the values there. You have triglycerides, you have total cholesterol, you have LDL, you have HDL, and you also have the cardiac ratio, which is HDL divided by total cholesterol, giving you a way of evaluating the results. So that's a very simple way. But there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of to do this also correctly. First of all, you have to make sure that the testing strips, each bottle of testing strips contains a certain chip that you have to put into the machine. And that chip has to correspond to the bottle of strips, because if you put in a chip or forget to replace the chip from an earlier bottle, you're going to have wrong results. So you have to always match the chip with the bottle of test strips. Another very important thing you have to realize is that these test strips are moisture sensitive. That's why in the bottle of test strips you have a little desiccant, a little bag of desiccant, which keeps the moisture out. But you have to realize it's important. Particularly the HDL values can be, influenced by moisture content on the test strips. And we've seen that because, of course, we tested that, the company tested that. And what happens now and then is that people do a couple of measurements with these machines and in between leave the bottle open with the test strips. And that's very detrimental to the quality of the test strips. So you have to take out a test strip, put the lid back on the bottle, do the test, and not the reverse way, because then you can actually collect moisture in the bottle. And of course, it's maybe not so much of a problem here in Utah where the air is very dry, but if you go to Florida or Houston or places like that, you're going to have a lot bigger problem with moisture collection onto the test strips. So just keep your test strips clean, pure, and make sure they're accurate. And a very interesting technology advancement that the CardioCheck PA has made is that they have developed a strip which they call the direct LDL strip. And that is really a new advancement, because I talked about the way that you have to be fasted to get your LDL accurately. Well, this technology, the direct LDL measurement strip, eliminates that issue. This is the first thing that really measures your LDL directly, measures it, not calculates it using the Friedewald equation. So that means you do not have to be fasted anymore. There is no requirement with this direct LDL testing strips to be fasted to still get an accurate LDL value. So that is, I think, a great advancement, because that means you can do your cholesterol measurements anytime during the day, regardless of what people have eaten or not. It does not have any influence on the accuracy of the measurement. The little drawback is that it is only LDL on that strip. So if you want to have the full thing, if you want to have total cholesterol, HDL, triglycerides, and measured LDL, you need to do two tests. You need to do the original strip, which gives you all the thing but the calculated LDL, and then a separate LDL which measures it. So there's two tests involved to get the full spectrum of lipid parameters. So that's basically all it is there. It's a great little device. I mean, I use it all the time here when we talk about, when we have guests here in the office and people, want to know their cholesterol levels. We just pull out the CardioCheck PA and we measure their cholesterol values right on the spot. And it's really very interesting to see how people react to that and see, oh, I didn't know I had these kind of values, or, how they changed over time. It's really a little effective device. But, you can also decide to go to the lab, the hospital lab, very good choice as well, but you have to make sure you stick to that specific choice you've made. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was it for this week. A little education about how to measure cholesterol, what the pitfalls may be, and how to make the best experience of your bias life making sure that you observe the real changes that happen to your blood levels, the real changes that happen to your risk for cardiovascular disease, heart disease, and stroke. And I wanted to make sure everybody had the best experience they can hope for. Thank you very much for calling in this week. I hope you learned something. Next week is going to be the last call of the year, and it's going to be another exciting topic. Thank you, and bye-bye.